Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. 8 trucks have begun moving from Egypt into Gaza, reported by Egyptian state-affiliated Al Qahira News, amid escalating international pressure to address worsening starvation within the Gaza Strip. Israel has announced new humanitarian corridors and pauses to enable United Nations aid deliveries into densely populated areas. Israeli troops have boarded the Gaza-bound activist boat Handala as it approached the coast. According to multiple media reports, the Freedom Flotilla coalition has accused Israel of abducting the crew. Meanwhile, Hamas condemned the seizure as an act of piracy and called for international intervention. The incident heightens tension over aid access to Gaza. Thailand and Cambodia continue exchanging artillery fire across their disputed border, despite a ceasefire call facilitated by the US President Donald Trump. The death toll has risen to over 30 people, mostly civilians, marking the worst violence between the two in over a decade. The US President Donald Trump is set to meet European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen today amid his 4-day visit to the United Kingdom. She meets him with the hope to clinch a last-minute trade deal. Meanwhile, Trump has voiced 50-50 chance over the success of sealing the deal. Ukrainian drone debris has disrupted railway power supply in Russia's Volgograd region, according to local authorities cited by Governor Andrei Bocharov. No injuries were reported following the attack. However, this marks another strike deep inside of the Russian territory. Meanwhile, Russia has launched its first direct passenger flights from Moscow to North Korea's Pyongyang in decades, according to RIA. Nordwind Airlines will be operating the route once a month for now. The 8-hour Boeing 777 flight approved by Rosaviatsia marks a further deepening of ties between the two nations amid Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has vowed victory today in the country's anti-imperialist, anti-US stance as Pyongyang marked the 71st anniversary of the Korean War armistice, according to local state media KCNA. Kim made the declaration during a visit to a war museum, stressing North Korea's goal to become a rich country with a strong army. A Sudanese coalition led by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces has announced the formation of a parallel government amid the ongoing civil war. According to coalition spokespersons, Mohammed Hassan al-Taishi has been appointed as a prime minister, while RSF commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo will head the newly formed presidential council. The Israeli Defense Forces, also known as the IDF, have announced a daily 10-hour humanitarian pause in Gaza. Starting from Sunday, the pause will take place from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. local time. It will take place in 3 key areas: Al-Mawasi, Deir al-Bala, and Gaza City, where the IDF is not currently operating until further notice. The move is aimed at easing the growing humanitarian crisis in the region. The IDF said this decision is in line with directives from the political echelon and aims to facilitate the safe passage of humanitarian aid. Secure routes will be designated from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. local time for UN aid and aid convoys delivering food and medicine. This decision follows concerns over the worsening hunger crisis in Gaza, with 127 reported deaths from malnutrition, including many children. The UN has criticized airdrops of aid as inefficient. The IDF will continue its offensive operations while supporting humanitarian efforts. Now we are joined by Dr. Alvite Ningtujam. She's a Deputy Director and Assistant Professor at Symbiosis School of International Studies, joins us live from Pune. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Professor, how significant and how come this decision by Israel Defense Forces to implement a daily 10-hour humanitarian pause, it comes now? What does this timing state about this pause?
I think, thank you once again.
Thank
Good
you.
morning to the viewers. I think this has got to do with the growing concerns about the deterioration in the humanitarian crisis inside the Gaza Strip. And at the same time, it also must have been triggered by the growing pressures from the international community, particularly from some of the partners, important partners in Europe as well as in other parts of Asia that have really put that pressure on Israel to ease the restrictions which are being imposed with regard to the entry of the humanitarian assistance into the Gaza Strip. So the 10-hour relaxation which the IDF has announced, of course, would be very important in order to meet to cater to some of the problems inside the Strip. But at the same time, how much that window would be able to improve the situation, is a big question. Unless and until you have a ceasefire, which of course has fallen apart, and at the same time a long-term solution with regard to the movement of goods into the Strip, the situation will likely remain very, very serious. But the 10-hour window period, of course, is very important. Yeah.
And Professor, now how effective do you think these pauses can be, and how realistic is it that they can be done from starting today for ongoing humanitarian crisis, particularly with the concerns over malnutrition and civilian casualties?
Right. See, with regard to the effectiveness of that sort of a relaxation, it's given the gravity of the problem and the magnitude of the crisis inside the Gaza Strip, I don't think it's enough just to relax for a few hours or 10 hours or whatever that is. It has to be a long-term, long-drawn approach. But on what grounds will there be a further improvement remains to be seen. Had there been a ceasefire and had there been some sort of an agreement between the two sides, particularly between Hamas and the Israeli government, there could have been some improvement in the way how the humanitarian assistance are going inside. But if we do not have this sort of a relaxation or this policy on regular basis, the effectiveness of that measure could be curbed and could be a short-term, mechanism.
Thank you for sharing that, Professor. We'll come back to you. Please stay with us as we move on to our next news. In an interview to a public broadcaster, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said that everyone can see that Israel's blockade of aid entering into Gaza is a breach of decent humanity and of morality. When asked about whether Australia would follow France in recognizing a Palestinian state, Albanese said that it was not something that his government planned to do. Imminently, however, Albanese said that Australia would make the decision if certain circumstances are met, but also voiced concerns about Hamas's involvement in future governance. Hamas has stated that it is willing to transfer control of Gaza to an interim government supported by the international community in exchange for a permanent ceasefire, but also said it would not disarm while Israel's presence in Palestinian territories continues. Meanwhile, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has said that Arab nations will, for the first time, condemn Hamas and call for its disarmament at a UN ministerial event in New York next week. In an interview to a French weekly, Barrot said the move is aimed at encouraging more European countries to recognize Palestinian statehood. Barrot also said that half of the European countries have already confirmed their intention to recognize Palestine, while others, including the UK and Germany, are considering it. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Dr. Alvite Ning Tu Jam. Thank you, Dr. Alvite, for staying with us. Now, Prime Minister Albanese has called Israel's blockade of aid entering to Gaza breach of decent humanity. How does this reflect the growing international pressure on Israel?
Yeah, of course, we have seen that. I, in fact, had discussed this in your news channel the other day, that when we began with the conflict in 2023 October, there were lots of support which was coming in for the Israelis and what they are doing against Hamas. But as we have seen, further deterioration of the humanitarian crisis inside the Strip, and also because of the ongoing operations, there are increasing number of countries calling on Israel and putting pressure, political, diplomatic pressure on Israel to course correct or to reduce the violence or the military retribution. But again, more pressure, of course, more diplomatic pressure on Israel could put the country, in a difficult position. I mentioned that little bit of a difference in the way how we see the reactions of the international community during past conflicts in the 1970s, particularly in 1973 war, the post-war scenario. But again, despite the lack of very strong pressure against Israel this time around, there is also a visible, as you mentioned, there is also a visible, voices coming from some of the important partners of Israel to improve the situation and also to make some recalibration in their policy. Uh, but again, we will have to see how effective are these pressures on Israel, particularly on their diplomatic stance. It's very important for Israel, in my opinion, it's very important for Israelis to listen to their partners regardless of what they said that we are going to go full throttle against the Hamas. But the international pressure from some of the big allies or important allies should matter to Israel. But at the end of the day, the Israelis decide, what's deemed fit and best for them. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll come back to you in a minute. Now we move on to our next news. A ship carrying activists to Gaza, known as the Handala, was intercepted by Israeli forces, according to both the Freedom Flotilla Coalition and the Israeli Foreign Ministry. The Handala set sail from Italy earlier in July, reportedly aiming to defy Israel's blockade and deliver humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza. According to a live stream from the converted trawler, Israeli forces could be seen on board and approaching the crew of civilian activists wearing life jackets. The ship's location was confirmed via its automatic identification system, and details such as handrails, deck colors, and wooden frames matched those of the Handala, as verified by the French lawmakers who also confirmed the boat's interception. The ship, whose crew included lawmakers, lawyers, doctors, and journalists, also said on social media's platform X that it had been intercepted by the Israeli military. Meanwhile, Israel's foreign ministry has clarified that the vessel was stopped for attempting to illegally enter the maritime zone of the Gaza coast, and that it was being safely escorted to Israeli shores. The ministry also confirmed that all passengers are safe. Let's take a look at what an activist on the Gaza-bound aid boat had to say. So we go back to our guest discussion with Dr. Alvite Ningtujam. He's a deputy director and assistant professor at Symbiosis School of International Studies. Thank you, doctor, for staying with us. Now, this ship was carrying a range of civilians, including lawmakers, lawyers, doctors, and journalists as well. So how does this involvement of such individuals shapes the narrative around this ship's interception and blockade?
Well, this sort of exercises, this sort of activities we have seen this similar activities in the past as well. In 2010, we had a Gaza flotilla coming from the Turkish Mavi Marmara, and that led to quite a problem, the violence. And similarly, again, we are seeing this right now, and the Israelis are very firm on protecting the entry of this, as per their term, the illegal, movements of the ships into the Strip, which also means that they really do not want to allow any unauthorized entry of such ships into the Strait, for which the Israelis have a major control in that particular water. But again, coming to your question about the narratives, of course, this would be used as a very good pointer by some of the human rights watchers or activists talking about the clampdown on some of the civilians which are going towards the Gaza Strip, carrying along with them the humanitarian requirements. But again, we will have to see whether this would lead to further pressure. Of course, there will be many organizations, there would be many watchers, activists that would really call out on Israel to, for, according to them, violating the international law. But this is again, I'm not an expert on human rights issues, and so I will not be able to give much comments on this. But this is something which the Israelis are very firm with, that they would not allow any entry of, according to them, illegal ships into the Strip.
And now, could this act of defiance escalate tension in international diplomatic channels, particularly with European nations that have publicly criticized Israel's actions?
Well, again, coming to my own points, that this has been, this sort of activities have been, it is not the first time this kind of activity has taken place on the waters. Again, this again, can be related to the first question that you asked about the international pressure, or the second question that was about international pressure. Of course, there will be, calls coming in, diplomatic signs, and pressure coming in from different parts of the world, including from the European countries. They have been very vocal about what the Israelis are doing vis-a-vis the Palestinians or the Gazans. I won't be surprised again if this is taken up on a serious scale to again pressurize the Israeli government to become a little less high-handed on this sort of activities.
Thank you very much, Professor and Dr. Alwhite, for joining us today and sharing your insight. Now we move on to our next news. The U.S. President Donald Trump continues to be interested in settling the conflict in Ukraine and wants to see concrete actions to bring it to an end. This is what U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in an interview. Rubio further added that Trump has done everything possible to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. Rubio also said Trump is growing increasingly frustrated that his interactions and calls with Putin have not led to any results. Meanwhile, reportedly, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer will discuss ways to end the Russia-Ukraine war during his meeting with President Trump in Scotland. Reportedly, Starmer is expected to discuss further support for Ukraine. The talks between both the leaders are scheduled for July 28th. Now we're joined by retired Major General Sudhakar Ji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. Thank you, Sudhakar Ji, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, the U.S. President Trump has expressed his frustration over lack of progress. So, as a military expert, how do you assess the effectiveness of direct leadership engagement in such conflict resolution?
Yeah, Asoma, good afternoon. Thank you for getting me to your show. Excellent question you have raised. My personal take as a student of geopolitics and matters related to Russia-Ukraine conflict, ongoing conflict, is that that element of trust has to be regained. It has to be restored. To me, it appears that not much of sincere attempt has gone in, because if the sincerity is to manifest, then it has to address the core issue. The core issue has to be understood as to why Russia invaded Ukraine on 24th of February 2022. Why did it happen? Because until it is understood, perhaps all other steps will fall flat. So therefore, for Trump, yes, he did assure, made a commitment that he would bring the ongoing conflict to an end within 24 hours of he having assumed the presidency, but it's not that simple. These are very complex issues. There are multiple stakeholders. So therefore, I would say a good beginning would actually could be made if there are clear indications of non-supply or stopping all the supplies of arms, weapons, and ammunition or warlike stores by the Western alliances to Ukraine. This, perhaps, to my mind, would be a clear indication that yes, Donald Trump and his allies are serious about the proposal. One. Number two, there has been a strategic agreement between United Kingdom and Ukraine this year only in January as a long-term strategic partner of 100 years, meaning that UK, come what may, will support and extend all assistance to Ukraine to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity and words to that effect. It may not be the same expression, but it's a long-standing kind of a commitment. Under these circumstances, since Europe is being left in a lurch, or the NATO forces, I would say, less Canada and USA, there is a strong feeling within the Europe as to how best they can negate the stance of Donald Trump effectively and bring Donald Trump back to the fray. Back to the fray means, along with the European Union and UK put together, they should continue to support Ukraine in the conflict against Russia. So therefore, there is a contradiction, there is definitely a friction in the very concept and idea, and it will do good to answer your question directly. If the senior leadership or summit level meeting takes place one-on-one, Donald Trump, as the president of the superpower, he prevails upon the leadership in Europe and he mellows down. As of now, he is actually putting pressure on Europe to raise their expenditure or the rate of percentage of the GDP to be raised from the existing level to 5% by 2035. So he could actually do good to be with the Europe and take them along if he really wants peace and not supply the hardware and the military support to Ukraine as is happening today. That would be a very clear indication. Plus, the demands and the aspirations of the Russia have to be understood if he is actually wanting to make meaningful gains as far as ceasefire is concerned. Back to you, Asom.
Thank you very much for joining us and sharing that insight, retired Major General Sudakarji. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. A Sudanese coalition led by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, also known as the RSF, has announced the formation of a parallel government, a move opposed by the army. Mohammed Hassan al-Taishi has been appointed Prime Minister, while RSF leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo will head the Presidential Council. The new government includes a 15-member council with regional governors for areas controlled by the RSF. The coalition spokesperson emphasized that the government aims to challenge the legitimacy of the army-led administration. The military, however, has condemned the move and vowed to continue fighting until it regains control of Sudan. Now we're joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo, Japan. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, RSF's formation of a parallel government in Sudan is a direct challenge to this army-led administration. So what does this move signal about the shifting power in Sudan?
Originally, the war broke out in the capital, Khartoum, but March this year, RF lost in the battle in the Khartoum, and the army side got Khartoum. So after that, RSF needs something to legitimate capital for the country. So they declared independence and forming the government in the western side. Now, RSF still holds western side of Darfur, southwestern side, and the army has the advantage in the eastern side of Sudan. So that's why it looks like there are the two governments in Sudan. So that's why the to legitimize their governance, the RS try to form the government and set up the capital, or something like that is needed. To negotiate with the army, negotiate means that, of course, including the war fighting as a cut. So that's why they try to form, I think.
And Dr. Satur, now could this parallel government gain international recognition, or will it be seen as an illegitimate challenge to Sudan's constitutional order?
Just now, I do not think so. Because currently, most of the international community believe that Sudan is only one. But at the same time, which side from the government is international community still waiting to watch. And international community lacks the motivation to intervene because the complexity of the Sudan means that it is not easy to conclude such kind of the division of the political parties, because in the past what happened is Sudan was separated north and south, or Darfur conflict exists. Now the east and the west separated. This means that Sudan is disbanding day by day. So under such kind of conditions, if the foreign country or international community intervene in this situation, there is a possibility that they will be part of the one faction of the Sudan, and they do not have the interest to do that. So that's why just take this stance to wait what happened in the Sudan is one of the interests of the most country. But at the same time, the Middle Eastern country or the country around Sudan has the interest to intervene in the conflict itself because they have their own interest. So that's why the intervention itself is secretly, quietly, it has happened. But this is not meaning these countries want to arrange a ceasefire or show the effort to re-establish the Sudan. So they do not have the interest to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru Nagao, for joining us all the way from Japan, as always. Thank you very much. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.